It's 2024 and the long-awaited 60th anniversary specials have been and gone. In just the past 3 months we've had 4 stories, 2 Doctors and a whole new era beginning with the 15th Doctor and Ruby Sunday. As for my thoughts on the specials themselves, I had a lot of fun with them. Wild Blue Yonder and The Church on Ruby Road were great adventures exploring new territory for the show, and the first half of The Giggle was a suitably mad and epic finale. And in a big surprise, I really liked the 14th Doctor. I'm still not 100% sold on bringing an old face back for the character, but with a nuanced and wiser performance from David Tennant paired with, in my opinion, a better costume, I found myself getting quite attached to this Doctor and anticipating his final adventure. But I think the episodes were hindered by having to act as both a fun reunion for the old team and a bridge between 2 eras. The lack of a point of view character to ease us back into this world especially hurts the Star Beast, as entertaining as all the Meep shenanigans were.
Time will tell how these specials will be received in the context of the wider show, but one particular aspect will definitely be remembered for a long time.
Yes, in a bold and unique twist, the 14th Doctor didn't regenerate, but bi-generated, with Ncuti Gatwa emerging from Tennant's body in the climax of The Giggle. Or at least it would have been a surprise twist if someone hadn't leaked it online and shared it around to the point where it was near impossible to avoid. Yeah, still miffed about that. It was still a huge moment, prompting much discussion and a fair amount of confusion. I'll save my thoughts on bi-generation until the end of the video, but to understand both the narrative and production reasons this was done, and because I'm an unemployed media grad with nothing better to do, I'm going to dissect everything we currently know about this strange new process. This includes information from the show, Transmedia, and behind-the-scenes sources.
I've tackled some pretty tricky Doctor Who questions in the past, so let's see if I can make some sense of bi-generation. First, let's just agree there is no official canon for Doctor Who.
Writers have shown resistance to the concept, and the mythology is constantly shifting as creative teams come and go and the tastes of the audience change. The Doctor we know today is a two-hearted Time Lord raised on Gallifrey who stole the TARDIS and has been travelling ever since. But until 1969, the Doctor was simply a human from the distant future with one heart who constructed the TARDIS himself. No, really, this is all either implied or explicitly stated in the early seasons.
What?
Now they were born half human, now they're a founding father of Gallifrey, now they're the last Time Lord, now they're a being from another realm and possibly the first Time Lord. We pretend the history of Doctor Who is this beautiful tapestry of facts and figures, when really it's more like a messy finger painting that's been consistently added to for decades.
I'm saying all this to make it clear there's no point getting hung up over what is and isn't canon. Taking this into account, I've divided the information in this video into 4 main categories. I've nearly got that is hard to do.
TV canon. I'm using canon loosely here, but this pertains to any information stated, shown or implied in the show itself. For instance, it's established in An Unearthly Child that the initials TARDIS stand for time and relative dimension in space. Aside from a period where dimension was pluralized, this has remained the official acronym ever since. Implied information is a bit vaguer, but I'll always make it clear when something is clearly stated or just speculation. Transmedia Canon. This refers to information from transmedia texts, including novels, audio dramas, comics, and video games. The BBC largely takes a neutral view of the expanded universe, neither confirming nor denying its canonicity, with a few exceptions. Adventure games is the only canon. Facts from these sources often fill in narrative gaps from the TV series. For example, although we know the 10th Doctor and Martha was stuck in 1969 during the events of Blink, we only had a brief glimpse of what they got up to there. However, the comic A Little Help from My Friends revealed Tennant and Martha had an adventure with 13 and the fam during this time, including such gems as 13 interrupting her predecessor before he can mention Rose again, and her explaining the basics of gender identity. It's optional whether you want to count events from Transmedia in your personal headcanon, but it is always worth discussing. Word of God canon. Taking its name from TV tropes, this refers to information from behind-the-scenes material, such as documentaries, articles, or statements on social media. It doesn't have to be stated in the text itself, but is worth considering when discussing ambiguous matters. For an example involving Rusty Davis, the character simply credited as the woman in The End of Time was intended by Davis to be the Doctor's mother. This is never confirmed or implied on screen, but was revealed in the 2010 edition of The Writer's Tale, and actress Claire Bloom was even told this when she was cast. Spoiler alert, but most things we know about bi-generation fall into this category. Interpretive canon. Self-explanatory, really. Fan theories, interpretations suggested by fans, or to some extent info from the TARDIS wiki. This is probably the loosest category, and I mainly included it so I could discuss how some fan ideas about bi-generation have slightly cleared up the confusion for me.
My arbitrary definitions out of the way, let's tackle bi-generation head on.
from what I can tell, there was no foreshadowing or build up to Bi-Generation in The Star Beast and Wild Blue Yonder, save for a few moments where Donna confronts the Doctor's inability to stop and keep in contact with friends. This comes to a head when 14 and Donna arrive in Soho 1925, and she warns him that he's wearing himself out after a lifetime of non-stop adventure and tragedy. We now jump to the final confrontation with the Toymaker atop Unit Tower. Having played a game with the first Doctor in 1966's The Celestial Toymaker, and won against the 14th in 1925, playing by the rule of threes, the Toymaker seeks to play a game with the next Doctor, and so violently strikes the 14th with a galvanic beam. Donna and Mel comfort the Doctor, and it looks like business as usual, with that familiar golden energy, and even a nice nod to the parting of the ways, with Murray Gold incorporating a little bit of his 2005 piece Hologram over Mel's line,
"Because every single one of you is fantastic."
Accepting the change, David's Doctor repeats his famous catchphrase, and the energy suddenly ceases. Feeling some discomfort, he asks his friends to pull at his arms, commenting that it feels different this time. And it's here where the 15th Doctor finally emerges, splitting off from 14 in a moment that surprises everyone present. Pushing against each other, the Doctors are separated. And interestingly, the process appears to have only affected the Doctor biologically, since half of 14's wardrobe makes its way onto 15, leaving the new Doctor owning the scene in just his shirt and pants.
Why did you end up in your pants?
After much confusion, the new Doctor explains that Bi-Generation is supposed to be a myth, presumably among the Time Lords, and it's here where we'll have to dip our toes into Interpretive Canon. It's been inferred by some fans that this phenomenon was caused by the Toymaker as part of his games, but given his visible confusion in this scene, I think we can rule this out. 14 says,
"And you did this! You doubled us!"
Which to me just means he was the one to kill him with the galvanic beam, which led to the Bi-Generation. Interestingly, he does seem to suggest this could happen again, and gleefully imagines killing a meadow of Doctors over and over. Jumping to later on, the Doctors are victorious in defeating the Toymaker in a game of catch, banishing him from reality forever, and then returning to the TARDIS to discuss what will happen next. It's here where the overall theme of these anniversary specials seems to come to fruition, as Donna and the 15th Doctor convince the 14th to settle down and deal with their centuries of trauma and loss. It's explained that the Doctor is running on fumes and has yet to stop and consider all they've been through. Donna even deduces that he subconsciously chose his old face and found her to come home, recognizing how worn out he is. We also get this exchange.
Fine. I'm fine because you fix yourself. We're Time Lords, we're doing rehab out of order.
Exactly what this means is debatable, but the most common interpretation I've seen is that the 15th Doctor is indeed older than 14, hailing from his personal future. Donna even points out that 15 is technically older than 14 due to coming after him. I'll discuss this further in the next section. Reluctantly agreeing to stay on Earth and live an ordinary life, the 14th Doctor still can't bear to leave the TARDIS, which gives the 15th an idea. Realizing that the Toymaker's domain is still lingering, the laws of physics and reality may still be fluid in a state of play, and so he uses a mallet to literally hit the TARDIS so hard, it spawns an identical copy, bar a jukebox and wheelchair accessibility.
You finally caught up with the 21st century!
He begins this line of thinking by noting that Bi-Generation has never happened before, which further suggests to me that while the Toymaker didn't purposely split the Doctors, the cartoonish logic of his games and his realm was what allowed the process to take place. In short, Bi-Generation is not traditionally possible, but through the alien physics of his realm, it became so in that moment. And so, the 15th Doctor says his goodbyes and flies off for new adventures while the 14th remains on Earth with the Noble family to heal while still having occasional trips in his TARDIS.
And with no mention of Bi-Generation in the recent Christmas special, this is probably all we're going to know about the process for the foreseeable future, at least as far as the show is concerned.
David Tennant's Doctor is likely to just fade into the background as he's no longer the main protagonist, but since Yasmin Finney's Rose can be briefly glimpsed in the Season 1 trailer, I expect we'll get a small hint of what he's been getting up to. Less than a week after the Giggles broadcast, a novelization of the episode was released as an ebook and eventually a physical release.
Full disclosure, I haven't actually read the Giggle novelization, but the Target books I have read, I really enjoyed. They're such fun retellings of the episodes.
Based on the reviews and extracts I've read, it seems James Goss has had a lot of fun expanding Davis's script, even writing it in character as the Toymaker.
But how was the Bi-Generation handled?
The book takes a slightly novel approach to introduce the concept. The paragraph splits in half along with the Doctors, and for the sake of simplicity, the 14th is referred to as the Old Doctor, while the 15th is called the New Doctor. It's a small detail, but it gives me a better idea of what's happening and how there may be some timey-wiminess going on here. The first-person narration from the Toymaker seemingly confirms my suspicion that he did not purposely split the Doctor, as he describes the phenomenon as fascinating and makes a few meta jokes about fanfiction and GIFs, with the Toymaker because this was bi-generation. He was a blip. Banquo at the feast, Aunt Mavis out staying her welcome till Boxing Day. At any moment he'd start to fade away, wouldn't he? So much left unsaid. So much left undone. And this continues throughout the rest of the book, with the Old Doctor constantly afraid he's about to disappear. When the New Doctor comforts him with a hug, the Old Doctor thinks he's going to be reabsorbed and that his burden will be passed to his new self, being perplexed when this doesn't happen. What does all this mean? Well, to me, it suggests that the 15th Doctor is still the Doctor's next incarnation, just brought into existence earlier than usual due to the state of play. He calls himself a blip, Banquo's ghost in Macbeth, an echo of his past just lingering alongside his new incarnation. From this perspective, when the 15th Doctor claims to be fine because the 14th fixed himself, he means that after the 14th's rehabilitation on Earth, he will eventually fade away Marty McFly style and become the 15th, completing the process. I'm guessing he gets transported back to that moment atop Unit Tower just in 15's body. These two are indeed the same being, just from different points in the timeline. Bi-generation is less a biological process but a temporal one, pulling the New Doctor into existence alongside his old self. Jumping into Interpretive Canon for a moment, it's confirmed in stories like The End of Time, The Time of the Doctor, and Twice Upon a Time, that's a lot of times, that regeneration allows for a state of grace, where the old body is healed and the Time Lord can choose whether to complete the change or delay it. Maybe the bi-generation has extended this state of grace to the rest of the 14th Doctor's lifetime, before he eventually completes his transformation into the 15th. This is already a popular piece of fanon, and it's even the stance taken by the TARDIS wiki, but the novelization appears to be the source for this interpretation. Other interesting details from Goss's book include 14 being afraid he'll never see the TARDIS again, and worries that if he didn't vanish or skulk off to fade away on his own, that there would have to be 2 Doctors in the TARDIS. He also notes what a game changer it is knowing there are now 2 Time Lords and 2 TARDISes in the universe, pretty much confirming that as far as the Doctor is aware, he's the last of the Time Lords once again, following the Timeless Children and the Flux storyline. It's also revealed that it's only been 15 hours since the 13th Doctor regenerated. That's right, Liberation of the Daleks, Destination Skaro, the CBeebies Bedtime Story, yes I'm counting it, and these 3 specials unfolded over less than a day for the Doctor. No wonder he needed a rest. A slight change in wording has the 14th Doctor ask how he can be so broken if the 15th is clearly fine. He replies, "We're Time Lords, we're just doing the rehab out of order," which makes the line a bit more clear in my mind.
And as far as I know, that's all that was added to the bi-generation in this book. There's a lot of interesting tidbits here that I think were really needed in the TV version.
We now know that time travel is playing a role here, with the 15th Doctor coming from the 14th's future, having completed his rehab and, in a bootstrap paradox, Google it, convinces his younger self to start the process in the first place.
With this better understanding of the process, let's step out of the narrative universe and into our own to discuss the Word of God. Not the God, this guy.
As part of the Whoniverse collection on iPlayer, in-vision commentaries for the new episodes have been made available. The commentary for The Giggle is possibly the most in-depth yet, as Russell T. Davies, David Tennant and Phil Collinson discuss the title sequence, unused ideas, and even a controversial theory from Russell. We learned that Russell discussed the idea of handling regeneration this way years ago with Collinson, as work on the script for The Giggle began as early as October 2021, before the broadcast of Series 13. Russell was even worried that the Toymaker's store shrinking down would be too similar to Dan's house in the Halloween apocalypse. I'm assuming the references to the Flux were added in later, since the guilt from that event continues to haunt the Doctor throughout these specials. Jumping to another source, in a statement on Radio 1 in January, Russell revealed the script was written before the 15th Doctor was cast, seemingly confirming David Tennant's return was always on the cards. In fact, the idea of a bi-generation was discussed with Tennant before he even received a script, suggesting to me that this was how his return was pitched to him. Having previously portrayed regeneration as a tragedy, and in the 10th Doctor's case, like the death of the character, Davis wanted to treat it as a happier, triumphant event. Look at the 14th Doctor's face when he sees the 15th. There's no dread, no anger, no grief. He is ecstatic and excitedly hugs his new self.
As someone who was never really comfortable with how regeneration was treated like a death in the end of time, I really appreciated 14 reassuring Donna that he's not dying and embracing his next incarnation.
Having the Doctor team up with his next incarnation to save the day partly came from a desire to satisfy the expectation for a multi-Doctor story for the anniversary, which may have impacted his decision to bring David Tennant back alongside a new actor. It's worth noting that Russell has been open about not liking multi-Doctor stories as far back as a 2009 interview with SFX magazine, explaining that he doesn't actually think you're seeing 3 different Doctors but 3 different actors. He enjoys them as celebrations of the show, but wonders how many fans consider the 3 Doctors or the 5 Doctors their all-time favourite. There's that extra level of production in it, and actually you have to face the fact that they're different actors. I could go and write a great film about a man who meets a very young version of himself, and a middle-aged version of himself, and an older version of himself. That's drama. That's a film, a high-concept film. But actually, because you're dealing with different actors, you can't do that with the 3 Doctors. It fights itself. All the beautiful things that are there to be said would sound ridiculous if it was Peter Davison saying that to John Pertwee. It just wouldn't work. All the emotion and the bittersweetness inside would be fought by what the actors look like.
To be crystal clear, he doesn't at any point belittle the work of the production teams that worked on those stories. He just admits he personally couldn't write a multi-Doctor story.
I'm sure his views have changed somewhat since that interview. We've had at least 4 or 5 TV multi-Doctor adventures since then, but I imagine having the current Doctor meet the next was his way of reinterpreting this anniversary tradition. Jumping in with a 15th Doctor who doesn't undergo any post-regenerative rituals such as amnesia or selecting his costume came from feeling there'd been enough of that with previous incarnations.
But now it's time to discuss this theory that Russell first revealed in this commentary. He described it as just that, a theory. So its canonicity is debatable, but here's what he said.
I think what with Peter having been in and Colin having been in, I think down the timeline they all separated. They all went like that. All the Doctors came back to life with their individual TARDISes. It's a gift of the toy maker. And they're all out there travelling around. And it's what I'm calling a Doctorverse. Oh, I want to create a future in which Sylvester McCoy can just arrive and have an adventure.
That's right. According to this theory, each of the previous 13 Doctors, and I guess the Warren Fugitive Doctors, all bi-generated, leaving them alive and well in the wider universe with their own TARDISes. Tales of the TARDIS, as I explained in my previous video, is a series of omnibus versions of classic stories with brand new sequences featuring classic Doctors and companions as a framing device. I think it's interesting that Russell specifically mentions Davison and Baker returning in this series, which makes me think that the Doctorverse may just be an attempt to offer an in-universe explanation for the inevitable continuity issues such reunions create. However, he continued to big up this idea on the official Doctor Who podcast, where he directs fans to the In Vision commentary, which contains
astonishing revelations about the entire lore of Doctor Who and the creation of the Doctorverse in the moment of that bi-generation. It's much bigger than you think, and I hope could lead to all sorts of things.
This suggests his theory has more weight to it, and could even lead to future stories and spin-offs, with Russell even comparing the idea to the animated Spider-Verse franchise. As for why this lore-changing theory wasn't addressed in the show itself, he explains it would be difficult to find a place where the story could stop and discuss the idea. I suppose that's fair, but it has left me slightly confused over whether this theory is meant to be taken seriously or not. The discussion seems playful in the commentary, but on the podcast he confidently promotes this as a gateway to new stories, so which is it?
This ambiguity is why it's been classed as Word of God canon and not TV canon.
The companion series Doctor Who Unleashed provides a bit more clarity around bi-generation itself. Russell explains,
Bi-generation we discover is an ancient myth of the Time Lords, where instead of a new body taking over from the old body, the new body separates from the old body and both are left alive.
When asked if this process has now left 2 Doctors roaming the universe, he had this to say.
It means David is parked. David is living. For once, we've got a happy Doctor who is no longer saving the universe, while the Doctor, which is always the next Doctor, and that's always true Doctor Who, the Doctor is the next Doctor, is out amongst the stars.
This apparently wasn't clear enough for a lot of viewers, leading National Treasure Graham Norton to ask Ncuti Gatwa if David's Doctor is still hanging around.
14 is like now in his healing era. He's off to have some therapy and chill out from a lifetime of saving the universe.
As for the biological aspect of the process, in Doctor Who magazine 599, Catherine Tate interprets bi-generation as the Doctor regenerating out of himself and becoming two. This article also includes some brief extracts of the script, which I originally was going to use to inform this section, until BBC Writers' Room dropped the full script on their website in February. There are some fascinating moments of direction and a few surprises in there, such as all of the Toymaker's accent shifts being scripted, and even an extended portion of 14's regeneration where he laments losing his body again so quickly, and Mel beginning a tangent about time and the Rani. Interestingly, the directions specify that the regeneration energy was meant to remain throughout the process, rather than disappear after the Doctor's supposed last words. The split itself is described as showing no blood, no ripping, no pain. It's like an amoeba separating. To the best of my understanding, an amoeba is an organism or type of cell with the ability to alter its shape, which reproduces through cytokinesis or cell division. Essentially, a single parent cell will separate into two daughter cells.
I probably butchered that explanation, but by comparing bi-generation to this process, it kinda clears up what's going on here.
Regeneration has historically been described as a process where the Doctor's dying cells are transformed into new ones, so bi-generation likely involves these new cells completely separating from the old ones, leading to a new body and a new Doctor. This also explains why it doesn't affect their clothes. As for whether or not this is compatible with the time travel elements I discussed before, I'll have to come back to it. The script follows the novelisation by referring to the 15th Doctor as the new Doctor, and interestingly, the line about only 15 hours having passed since the power of the Doctor comes from this script. The last page describes the new Doctor, now simply the Doctor, embarking on their adventures as Ncuti Gatwa finally becomes the definitive article. The Doctor's line about the Toymaker doubling him is notably absent, which leads me to believe it was a bit of ADR added to the episode to add more clarity to the scene. Watch that moment again, it never cuts to the Doctor, suggesting it was a line added in later. We also get a page almost entirely consisting of the word catch, and an unfilmed alternate ending featuring Wilf, presumably dropped after Bernard Cribbins passed away.
And that's all the behind the scenes info on bi-generation, which has cleared up some things and vastly complicated others. So let's start wrapping things up by delving into Interpretive Canon.
Most Doctor Who fans have at some point fallen down a rabbit hole on the TARDIS wiki, the fan-written and maintained encyclopedia of the Whoniverse. It's known for, among many things, having pages dedicated to arses and being written in past tense even when discussing living people. But its commitment to only including information from narrative sources makes it one of the more reliable wikis on the internet. On the topic of bi-generation, the wiki has taken the stance that the 15th Doctor is indeed from the Doctor's future, with the 14th Doctor retiring, eventually overcoming his issues and completing the bi-generation from which the 15th Doctor emerged. This passage curiously cites the TV version of the giggle for this interpretation rather than the novelisation. The editors of this wiki also found some unintentional foreshadowing in the 2021 finale, The Vanquishers. In this story, the 13th Doctor was separated into 3 bodies through some temporal shenanigans and reunified by time itself. But the entity cryptically asks how long she may remain unified.
I restore you, Doctor. Reunify you. But for how long?
This category of canon is the best place to discuss fan theories. A popular idea I've seen floating around is that in his retirement, the 14th Doctor lives for an exceptionally long time and becomes the curator seen in The Day of the Doctor. It would explain how he knew about the Doctor revisiting his favourite faces, since he remembers that time he looked like the 10th Doctor again, but how the hell he was able to regenerate if he's still supposedly destined to become the 15th is anyone's guess. The curator's identity was never explicitly revealed on screen, but Stephen Moffat has confirmed in interviews since that he was intended to be a retired future incarnation who settled down at the National Gallery and has returned to the likeness of his 4th incarnation. Transmedia has gone on to support this reading, including the Big Finish audio series Stranded, which from what I've read confirms him to be a future Doctor, even taking on the appearance of an elderly 6th Doctor at one point. The curator even states that his incarnation number is extraordinarily high, suggesting he is indeterminably far in the Doctor's future. Personally, I think the curator and the 14th Doctor are separate incarnations. It's a nice idea, but I don't think it fully adds up. Terrell Charles from the official podcast proposes that the curator is a bi-generated 4th Doctor, with Juno Dawson seeing bi-generation as a workaround for actors aging out of the role. Through this new theory, previous Doctors can return as older, bi-generated versions of themselves. Crystal D excitedly suggests that the 5th Doctor in Time Crash is a bi-generated version, and I hate to say, actually, but that story entirely hinges on him being the original 5th Doctor, with the resolution only being possible because the 10th Doctor remembers seeing himself do this as the 5th. I don't see how this would work if he's a new 5th Doctor, unless their current self remembers all their bi-generated memories or something. I don't know, man, this is complicated.
The term Doctorverse suggests multiple realities, so perhaps the timeline itself begins to branch, with each Doctor emerging in their own timeline.
This is somewhat supported by Tales of the TARDIS, which actually addresses the Doctor's older appearance. The 7th Doctor explains,
Time streams are funny things, and some I regenerate, and others I don't. It's all a matter of perspective.
Before the airing of The Giggle, I assumed this line just meant that the memory TARDIS had plucked this incarnation from a possible timeline rather than the main one, but now it could have a deeper meaning. This Doctorverse theory can also possibly explain the continuity issues caused by the 2nd Doctor's appearances in the 5 Doctors and the 2 Doctors, in which an older 2nd Doctor referred to events he couldn't possibly know about, and seemed to be on missions for the Time Lords with Jamie, despite first encountering them in the War Games. The Season 6B theory has long held the position that the Doctor was taken from his regeneration to undergo secret missions for Gallifrey's CIA, and this has been expanded in Transmedia stories, but now there's another possible way out of these plot holes. In other expanded media, the issue of characters leading contradictory personal histories has usually been hand-waved away with a meh paradoxes, allowing all timelines to coexist and opening the door to a whole range of extra stories and series. Ace, the Time War, exactly what species the Toymaker is, and Irving Braxitel, which from what I can tell is a very deep and complicated rabbit hole I'm simply too chicken to go down.
So now we have all the possible answers for what bi-generation is or could be. It's time I actually discuss what I think of it.
To remain as fair as possible, I rewatched The Giggle before writing this segment. I don't want this video to become a rant about the anniversary specials because I honestly enjoyed them quite a bit. Me and a group of friends watched them each week and each viewing was filled with excitement for the show. And there's plenty to love in The Giggle. Neil Patrick Harris is fantastic, David and Catherine are on top form, and Call Me Easy to Please, but the nods to the past really resonated with me. After missing the show at its peak popularity in the 2000s, there was something genuinely rewarding about seeing David Tennant's Doctor discuss events from the era I grew up with. But clocking in at just over an hour, the story moves at a breakneck speed, leading several scenes to feel rushed and the conclusion not feeling satisfying enough to round out this trilogy of stories. Give the special another 20 minutes or even expand it into a two-parter and I think the third act will be much more effective. Like a lot of people, I saw the rumours about the Doctor being split but quickly dismissed them and tried my best to avoid the leaks. But when the regeneration started so early, I knew they were true. And for what it's worth, the sequence itself is a lot of fun. Ncuti is instantly perfect as the Doctor, completely owning the scene with such energy and charisma, and seeing the 2 Doctors interact is as exciting as ever. Even the fake-out regeneration that opens the scene is effective, especially with Donna and Mel being present.
But it's everything after the Toymaker's defeat that doesn't work for me, and it's for one simple reason. I don't understand what's happening here.
The bi-generation just comes out of nowhere and is barely elaborated on. The very fact I felt the need to make this video speaks volumes about how little the script clarifies anything. I kept waiting for the story to just stop and explain what happened here. Are the 2 Doctors now separate beings? Can they both regenerate? Does 14 still become 15 in the future?
That second possibility didn't even occur to me until I saw fans and the TARDIS wiki taking that stance.
If 14 being destined to finish his therapy and then Marty McFly away to become 15 really is the answer, then that needed to be clearer. Considering the paratext, a lot of these accounts seem to conflict. In the episode itself, Ncuti very clearly says, because you fix yourself, but the subtitles claim it says fixed, past tense, pointing to him being a future incarnation, but the script and the novelization both say fix, so which is it?
I know that's nitpicking, but it highlights just how little clarity there is to this plot point, and for a moment as important as the 15th Doctor's first scene, this ambiguity is especially problematic.
And very few of the theories make complete sense to me. On my most recent viewing, the story was heavily suggesting to me that the two Doctors are now independent entities living out separate lives from this point forward, seemingly consistent with the idea of cell division. But then fans and the novelization ran with the more timey-wimey option, so which is it? And if 14 does become 15 in the future, then why does he need his own TARDIS? Shouldn't he just inherit it when the loop is complete? Or does the copy of the TARDIS fade away like 14 supposedly will? See, there's just so many questions the episode doesn't even attempt to address. Maybe the bi-generation isn't supposed to make sense. Simply a quirk of the Toymaker's realm.
Okay, then say that in the episode.
The script just confidently throws this game changer into the universe and expects you to carry on as normal. All these ambiguities and questions start to add up, and as a result, I just don't know how to feel when the end credits roll.
This is the introduction to a brand new Doctor. I shouldn't be spending so much of his screen time wondering about his predecessor.
Almost all my issues with this concept would be solved if there was just 1 or 2 lines clarifying what happened. I'm not saying spoon feed us information here, but look at it this way. I wrote and edited a whole video breaking down Amy Pond's age in the show's most time travel heavy era, and I didn't get what the rehab out of order line meant.
If someone as obsessed with time travel as I am didn't get that, how is the average viewer going to?
I'm worried that this new approach to regeneration will just confuse viewers and leave Tennant's Doctor as an awkward elephant in the room throughout Ncuti's era.
As for the concept itself, I don't think I understand it well enough to have any hard feelings either way, but in principle I don't care for it.
To me, the magic of the Doctor as a character is having a hero who constantly changes while staying fundamentally the same. Each Doctor is almost their own character and yet represent just one part of a greater whole. There's a certain tragedy and mystique to the idea that while the show never truly ends, aspects of it will. There's something special about the fact each incarnation leads the show for a bit and then they disappear, but the character lives on. There's a reason Peter Capaldi has said the show is fundamentally about death. It lets you grieve while remaining excited for the future. You may be sad your Doctor is leaving, but someone somewhere is about to fall in love with their Doctor. That's the key to the show's longevity. But I get the sense Russell T Davies views each incarnation as a different person altogether. The 10th Doctor's regeneration was treated like a death. He struggles with multi-Doctor stories because he just sees them as different actors, and in The Giggle we literally have the old Doctor handing over the TARDIS to the new. There's nothing wrong with this interpretation, I just don't personally subscribe to it. But I think leaving the previous incarnation alive, for lack of a better word, detracts from this, especially if the Doctorverse theory is to be believed. Maybe it's just an attempt to explain away continuity issues, but if you think about it for too long, it starts to fall apart. Do these bi-generated Doctors exist in their own timeline? Are there now 3 Tennant Doctors out there counting the meta-crisis? Russell talks about it as though it's an easy fix to work around needless exposition to explain a previous Doctor coming back, even joking that the 2 Doctors makes no sense. Now, I don't like that story, but are you seriously telling me that the Doctor crossing into his past and running into his younger self is more complicated than he's a maybe separate Doctor from a maybe separate timeline with his own maybe TARDIS who's now grown old because he's still out travelling? See, it causes so many more problems than it solves, and maybe that's why it was revealed in playful conversation in a commentary rather than the show itself. As for the 15th Doctor, I think leaving his predecessor knocking around on Earth slightly robs the new incarnation of his authority. I'm worried that certain viewers won't view Ncuti as the Doctor but a clone of the Doctor, which is why that rehab out of order line needed to be clearer. It needed to be emphasised that they are the same person, and the lack of the usual post-regeneration rituals leaves the show in a slightly uncertain place.
When the special first aired, I genuinely kept refreshing my feed to see if there was an announcement for a Tennant and Tate spin-off or something, but with both David and Russell confirming there are no plans for a return, I struggle to see what the bi-generation accomplished.
After The Power of the Doctor first aired, I explained in a video why I didn't like David Tennant returning as a mainline Doctor, seeing it as a step backwards and slightly distasteful to the landmark nature of Jodie Whittaker and Ncuti Gatwa's castings. but the scripts and David's performance honestly sold me on the concept. No one was more surprised than me by how much I enjoyed the 14th Doctor. But knowing that David's return and the bi-generation was always on the cards and seemingly not the result of Ncuti being unavailable, made me question if these specials couldn't have just been the introduction for his Doctor. With all of that said, I mostly enjoyed the giggle. I loved seeing the two Doctors interact, the Toymaker spicing up our lives, and some of Murray Gold's best music since his return.
But even after all that research and rewatching these episodes multiple times, I still don't fully understand what bi-generation is or what it really accomplishes in the grand scheme of things.
With a concept as bold as this for the show's anniversary year, we needed more clarity than we got. When Stephen Moffat introduced the War Doctor for the 50th anniversary, we not only got a mini-sode exploring his origins, but clear answers for where he fell in the timeline and the consequences of another regeneration being used up. Yes, it took us a lot of getting used to, but the Day of the Doctor managed to make us all fall in love with Hurt's Doctor, and I'm more than comfortable including him in the main lineup. This change to the lore was clearly explained and explored by the series itself, whereas bi-generation just emerges and is done with without a second thought. Honestly, the fact Ncuti Gatwa made such an impact despite this is a testament to how effortlessly charismatic he is in the role. And my confusion surrounding bi-generation didn't really impact my enjoyment of the Church on Ruby Road. It's still a fun introduction for 15 and Ruby, and it's honestly for the best that story isn't bogged down by having to explain what happened in the previous special.
Hopefully, as the years go on and the process is explored through Transmedia and even future episodes of the show, this bizarre event will just become another mad bit of the mythology we've come to accept.
Audiences managed to accept William Hartnell being renewed into Patrick Troughton with even less of an explanation, so maybe the same will happen here. Ncuti Gatwa is the Doctor, and I can't wait to see where he takes the character. I just wish his introduction was handled with more clarity and consideration.
But what did you think of bi-generation? Did any of this make any sense at all to you? Let me know in the comments, because I now earn money from these videos, so any traction and feedback is much appreciated, and I'll see you all next time.